Hey, what's going on? Got something a little bit different for this week's podcast episode. This is going to be a couple weeks ago. I did a panel, like a digital panel, with a couple of friends in the industry. So this episode will be, I guess that entire panel. That includes Andrew Cooley, Trey Denny, Reese Henry, and Julian Castro. All people that I have worked with at some point, or I guess worked with at some point, and been pretty close friends with in my time in the industry. Um, no, I still don't know exactly what this is going to look like on a regular basis for what these panels are, but I'm hoping to start to do a lot more of them in the future. So give this a listen. Definitely a little bit different. If you like these, let me know, and enjoy the episode. I guess to give the quick rundown for how this is going to play out, we'll get into intros. We're going to get into specific experiences from each person on the panel, how they got involved in the space, and what they currently do. Probably pretty brief in that area. Quick rundown of how they got involved, what their first experience was, what they currently do, and then we'll get into questions and open the probably a little bit of back and forth, more conversation as opposed to just rattling off the answers. But it should be pretty straightforward. Obviously, I've never personally done anything with a digital roundtable talk or anything like this aside from one-on-one podcast conversations. So there will be a learning curve here, I expect. So don't judge too hard, I guess is how I'll preface with that. I do have intention of putting this or making this some type of on-demand version as well, whether that's audio only on a podcast or somewhere on YouTube or something. Nothing figured out there yet, but I guess stay tuned for that. But to kick it off, the panel today consists of Andrew Cooley, Trey Denny. I don't think I've ever actually said your last name, Trey. Is that how you say it, Denny?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Reese Henry and Julian Castro, who are all people that I've personally either worked with I think we've worked all together in some capacity and at some point or another. So I'm glad to have all of you guys on. To jump right into it, I'll probably just open it up to Andrew to give a little bit of an intro, what you do, and yeah.
Sure. Like Zack said, my name is Andrew Cooley. I am the CEO of Esports Performance Academy. We got started last year after after we were at Infinite Esports and Entertainment together with Zack. I focus on player development. I've been in esports for about 18 years now, 19 years, sadly, and this summer. I started as a semi-pro and a pro player across a couple different titles: Counter-Strike, World of Warcraft, a game called Left 4 Dead. And then I was working on playing League professionally, and then kind of transitioned to the coaching and management side of things, and kind of the rest is history.
Cool. Trey?
Yes, hello. My name is Trey Denny. I'm a performance analyst and esports researcher. I primarily work with Rocket League, collegiate scene, RLRS, most notably a team called 72-Pin Connector. I've been in the scene for about 5 years now, 6 questionable. Worked pretty much any job you can think of in esports, from moderator to CEO. That's about it.
Cool. Reese?
Yeah, hi, my name is Reese. I'm a sports science graduate. Primarily worked on the operations side, but from the 5 years I've been involved, which is when I initially met Trey, I've done anything from the community side right up to owning my own organizations and acquiring some RLCS talents. Currently, what we're doing is consulting early stage organizations over at Mindstream, but yeah, that's the focus for the future.
Cool. And Julian?
excuse me. Name's Julian Castro. I'm the director for Luminosity Gaming. My responsibilities here are mostly day-to-day operations, influencer management, managing our socials, pretty much nearly about everything. Got started back in 2009 as a content creator in Call of Duty. And when sniping and sniping montages popularized, made a few teams, became a part of a few legendary teams, became an owner of Obey Alliance. Recently departed from there about 8 months ago. However, a lot of my influence and a lot of my time in esports has been spent in content creation, and that's pretty much where we're at right now.
Cool. And then the quick intro for me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Zack. I run Sector 6. Been doing that for the past 5 years now, a little over 5 years. So Sector 6 is an apparel brand in the esports community. So that's pretty much what my day-to-day looks like. I run a podcast, and now I moderate this. So that's it for me. Now, what I kind of wanted to segue here into, or the main topic of today's panel, the goal was to have it be about getting started in the esports space. The esports space, a lot of people do a lot of things very differently. And I guess I figured getting multiple people's perspectives of how they got involved is a good way to prove that there's a lot of different ways you can do it. So I was hoping to run through everybody's first experience with the space at a, I guess, like professional in quotation marks level, not just as a viewer, but more as a someone who worked in the space, and then, where it went from there. So Andrew, take it away.
So do you want me to go over my time like as a player, or just like from the coaching and management side of things?
Ooh, that's a good point. Maybe we brush through as a player, what games you played in, and then from there, how it scaled into what you do now.
Okay. So like I said briefly earlier, I got started in Counter-Strike. Basically, I got introduced to esports because I was hanging out in Ventrilo. If you're not familiar with that, it's basically like the early 2000s Discord. And one of my buddies asked if I was going to watch some big match. No idea what he's talking about. I saw it, and immediately I was blown away. It's what I decided that I really wanted to do was become a pro player. So I started just kind of, working morning, noon, and night on trying to get better and improve. Back then, as you can imagine, there's not really kind of any methodology to improve, because it was all being created and developed, and really still is today. But kind of use those tactics and those strategies that I had in Counter-Strike to move into other titles, and kind of the psychology of understanding how to play at a really high level was something that I was easily able to translate. Ultimately, from there, I decided that whenever I retired as a player, I was a financial advisor for about 5 years, but I always did kind of like coaching and management concurrently on the side. But ultimately, with the growth of esports, I was never going to be happy being a financial advisor. So resurrected an organization that I started back in college, and through networking and whatnot, ultimately ended up transitioning into working at Infinite or Optic, and was coaching and leading the academy program there. And what led from there is that, no one ever really kind of focused on player development truly in the esports industry. It was just always heavily geared towards the pro scene, and not as much about, how could somebody potentially get to the pro scene in a much more structured or regimented manner that you see that's synonymous with like traditional sports, because they have some really great infrastructure and pathways. And so that's ultimately what I decided that I wanted to dedicate my next steps to in esports, is trying to create that pathway. Having worked or having competed as a top player in a couple of different titles, and then having competed as a coach, I guess, if you want to use that terminology, and then having been a manager, trying to get the next generations up to that point. And so we work with everybody from a middle schooler all the way up to somebody who is a semi-pro or an academy player.
Cool. Trey?
I guess I was on a team initially for Rocket League. This was back when like tournaments were just barely a thing. Did that, placed third, thought it was fun, but it was a lot funner for me to manage an organization and manage teams. So from there, it just kind of spun out to be, hey, I want to run my own team. And from there, we started with Firebrand, which was published on a sports magazine. Not sure if it's still a thing. So that was a pretty big achievement. And from there, it was just kind of like chasing how much farther can I go. And that led into doing other things like being a chief communication officer for an organization called Mocket, which is now, I believe, an Asian company. And from there, sped off to a whole lot of other things, but mostly performance, like how do you make players better? And that's kind of what I've been dedicating myself to now, just how to make people better at playing games.
Cool. Reese?
Yeah, so I originally got into the sports scene quite simultaneously as meeting Trey through the esports scene, both playing and then going on to the operations side, alongside working with a charity known as Gaming for Adoption. So we worked on the brand side of things, building up an understanding of what they do, and from there it kind of, I guess, had a snowball effect of I was eventually given more responsibility to do a lot of more things. Eventually went on to work with a few RLCS organizations. A mentionable one would be Secrecy. So responsible for acquiring a lot of pro players and negotiating contracts, and then focused on my job at the moment, which is in the business development role for Adobe. And then sort of went into the consulting thing just because I've worked in so many positions now that kind of have an understanding on how to build the operations side up and the brand side up.
Awesome. And Julian?
Yeah, so for me, I guess when esports started becoming significant in my life, and as I started gaming as a hobby, but I guess I'd have to go back to Obey when I first became leader and then co-owner of that team. For us at Obey, a big thing was that we had hundreds of thousands of fans that, we were just gamers that, got lucky in a sense. And so nobody had ever monetized that model. Nobody had approached it and be like, how do we make money off of this? And I believe I was one of the first people to do that at Obey. We got, a couple of really nice sponsorships from DX Racer, Logitech, Razer. Still to this day, I have no idea how Logitech and Razer allowed that one to happen at the same time. But, through the monetization of those sponsorships, we were able to enter into Smite, which was our first big step into esports. We had a lot of great success there. I think we have one of the more legendary Smite stories that existed. Our first 3 months in the scene, we made it to the grand final of the World Championship versus NRG, which was a big moment for me, a big moment where I was sitting there and saying, this is my passion, managing teams, leading teams in any capacity. And we proceeded to have a lot more success forward into that year with winning the H1Z1 fight for the crown, winning the Smite Spring final, and kind of just developed from there as an organization in content, but also in esports. And that's really where I built this dynamic and where I find myself now in managing organizations that have this dual lane focus of not just being an esports team, but being a content focused team, which is a foundation that Luminosity heavily embraces, as the brand's extreme power mainly operates within our creators. And so, I have a lot of passion for the people that I work with, for working with creators in general and helping them mold their careers and understand how to make the best of their opportunity. And that's kind of how I really got started and where I am at now. So
Awesome. Now, originally I had a few of my own kind of questions lined up to talk through, but reading some of the questions that are in here now, I think some of these would probably provide a little bit more value, and obviously they're direct. So I think now is probably a better time to just jump into some questions as opposed to things that I had set up already. So Sun Milk, he had a few. He's got a few questions in here. But number one, and I think you know, I don't know if everybody needs to answer every question here. So if you have a good experience, if you have a good experience related to the question, or if you have a good answer or whatever, you know, I would say answer it. If you don't have, if you want to hold on for another one, you know, we don't all have to answer every single one, I don't think. But question number one: what experiences do you recommend for newcomers interested to work in esports? And you know, bring it back to Andrew.
For newcomers interested, I'd say probably networking a lot, just trying to see what opportunities, what events, what jobs are open for you to apply to. I think that kind of the days of, hey, you know, you just happen to compete or play in esports or having done something for an amateur org are kind of quickly dissipating because there's a lot more structure, there's a lot more money being injected into the industry, so it's becoming a lot more formalized, like you see with, you know, traditional sports or any other traditional business model. So I think that the best way that you can do it is make sure that you invest a lot of time and effort into your resume or into a cover letter. Make sure that you try to meet the right people, that you try to participate in events, maybe try to volunteer where you can. Just genuinely show people that you care about wanting to be a part of the scene, because I think that there's also a lot of disingenuous people in the scene that they get involved. They definitely hurt businesses. So I think that you know, all business owners are really trying to find the right key people that actually care about putting in the amount of hours required to work in esports and to do a good job because it's something that they're passionate about.
I agree. Trey, do you have anything to add to that?
Andrew pretty much covered it all, but one thing I can add to it is that there are tons of organizations, especially tournament organizations, who are always looking for someone. Like, if you actually want experience that gets you into the scene, just go hit up some people. Like, there's always going to be someone who needs a moderator or a graphic designer or just something. You know, that could just be the easiest way to get into the scene if you don't have any previous experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree. Reese?
Yeah, going back to what Andrew and Zack said, it's more of a case of making connections from the off, and also not limiting yourself to something you don't want to do. As an individual with no experience, the best way to get some sort of experience in the esports scene is through community events, tournaments. There are so many organizations now, especially at the amateur level, that do need people to get involved. But one thing I would definitely recommend is don't put yourself in a position or a role that you're not going to enjoy, because if you're not enjoying it, then it's so transparent that you're not enjoying it, because you won't put the effort in, and you know, at the end it's really not going to benefit you.
Yeah, I agree. Julian, not sure if you have anything to add on top of that, but if not, we could just jump right into the next one and then have you answer that.
We can go to the next one.
Okay. So also from Sun Milk, what do esport companies / organizations look for when reviewing an applicant? I figure this, you know, you probably had a lot of interest at Obey, and I'm sure now too. So I think this is a good question for you.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I think it's, you know, based on where the organization's values land. I think everybody approaches that process differently. However, for my personal preference leading Luminosity, I look for somebody who presents themselves appropriately, professionally, and I love, and this is going to probably come down to a few of the other questions I've seen, somebody that takes accountability for their growth and understands exactly how their platform works. You know, that's a really strong sign in a creator and a player, is somebody that understands through and through their schedule, what their goal is, how they want to achieve that goal. Often I get, you know, a lot of people DMing me. It's like, this is what I want. But there's, to me, no sense of how are you going to do it? How does Luminosity benefit from picking you up to the organization, and how together can we, you know, succeed as a player creator in Luminosity. And so I think the biggest thing is drive and understanding of, this is where I want to go and this is how I'm going to do it, instead of this is just where I want to go. Because there's so many people that want to say, I want to be the best creator. I want to be the greatest player in Fortnite. I want to be the greatest Rainbow Six player. Okay, well, what steps are you taking as an individual every day to show us that you're setting yourself apart from the thousands and tens of thousands of people who are trying to do the same thing you are? And I think that's pretty important.
I agree. I like that a lot. Yeah, definitely agree. Andrew, I guess same to you. Maybe we'll just kind of run through them question by question. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but if not, we'll just go to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to echo some of the stuff that Julian said, and that I think that the one of the sad things about the industry is the lack of professionalism that exists. Because truth be told, like a lot of people who are involved in it are younger people, like early mid-20s. And there's nothing wrong with that if you try to take the steps to improve your professionalism. It goes a long way, because you don't want the people who you're trying to educate or partner with in the industry to get the perception, well, everybody's just so casual and laid back. They're so flippant about their jobs because they work in esports. You want it to be a professional thing. So timeliness, how you present yourself, those things go a long way. On top of that, the other thing that Julian mentioned is accountability. That's a huge thing, is that nobody expects everybody to immediately know every single right answer or to 100% of the time get everything correct. But I think the effort that you put into, hey, I did mess that up, but I'm also going to go make it right, and I've learned from it, and I know for the future. That's a huge thing for employers. So I think that was a really good answer on Julian's part too.
Yeah, definitely agree. So then I will also give you the first dib at this next question. How do we draw the line for misconduct with a high-profile, popular, desirable player? I saw this one. We talked about this a little bit prior. I like this question a lot, and I'm definitely interested in hearing all four of your thoughts on this.
Are we starting with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if I'm the best person to ask this to. I think that, because I look at it from the standpoint of, typically it's going to be like, if I'm managing or working with the player, like how am I disciplining my players? So first of all, I always have a big meeting before anything gets going, that hey, these are my expectations of how you guys are going to behave and of how you're going to act on social media. Because there are a lot of people that, they do just go and kind of say whatever they want to say. They're not thinking about it. It goes back to that professionalism aspect that I just mentioned. So I think trying to set clear expectations for people is really good. Ultimately, people are still going to say what they want to say. They're going to have their own personality. They're going to have their own behaviors on social media. And so it's hard to kind of control that. As far as drawing the line, I think that, you can have the friendly banter, and I think that's fine. I think that adds personality. I think it adds some fuel to the scene and whatever. But you don't want to be genuinely evil or malicious towards somebody to try and hurt them for any reason, because everybody's a human, right? It's okay to have some jabs at each other, but why would you want to specifically harm somebody or hurt the psychological aspect of things over the internet? I don't really see any reason for doing that and truly becoming toxic. So that's kind of where I draw the line, is if it's friendly banter, it is what it is. Some people are like that. I'm way more passive on social media. I'm basically non-existent. But I think that drawing a line at toxicity is probably the best way to do it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. Trey?
I don't know that I have much to add for this.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like it comes down to just personal preference.
Yeah.
If it's meeting the culture that I'm bringing for my organization and how I want it to be presented, then it's fine. If it goes anywhere beyond that, or below that, then I guess that's where I would draw the line.
Yeah, I agree. Reese?
Yeah. So, in my opinion, regardless of the popularity of the player, when you're onboarding to ensure that they have an in-depth understanding of your guidelines and how you're interacting with social media and in person if people are attending physical events. At the end of the day, your organization has a culture, they have an ethos, you have things that you stand by and your values, and eventually you need to consider whether that player, regardless of their popularity, whether their actions are going to have a detrimental effect on your organization, because a lot of organizations may want to keep that player on just for the name, but in hindsight, it will do a lot of damage, and I've seen it happen in the past.
Yeah, I feel that. Julian?
Yeah, this one's a good one for sure. I've definitely had a good experience with handling cases like this. I think obviously everybody's correct. Internally, how somebody handles their conduct is definitely important to the culture of the company and how we handle that. Externally speaking, however, I think that most players understand, even through contractual talks and just through general presence on social media, that there is a line that you do not cross. And from an organizational perspective, these things are fairly obvious. Most of them I don't really need to even say, but there's just certain things you don't say, certain things you don't do on social media, in game. And if you cross that line, personally for us, there's almost a zero tolerance. Just because if you're putting yourself in the position to negatively impact your reputation, which then could hurt the reputation of the organization, whilst being fully aware of the repercussions of what that is you are doing, for us, it's almost silly to keep working with somebody like that. And it may seem a little bit harsh. Obviously, it is case by case, and there's things that are a little bit less heavy where we can come to understanding, like, all right, you can get off with the fine, we can move past this. I think it's for us about gauging the PR feedback that we get socially. So that's my stance on it. That's we draw the line at the obvious almost. With the more complex, we do deep dives, understanding the situation, and that's where we're at. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, if I was in a position to be managing multiple people, I think I'd probably be in the same boat. I've never, at least in the esports space, managed a full-on team, so I can't really speak from experience on anything like that. But I know for a fact if anybody drew or crossed the obvious line, I'd be right there with you. And there is a zero tolerance policy in my book too.
Yep.
So this next question is a good follow-up for that. Should previous misbehavior in the past be a major factor when associating with a player and staff? I guess we could just probably go from the top on this one. So Andrew, if you have an answer for that.
Yeah, I think that it can be a factor for sure. Can it be a major factor? Yeah, I think that there's probably a timeline associated. Like, let's say that you're 16, 17, 18, you probably make a major mistake. Maybe you say something as a player or whatever on social media, or however, maybe you misbehaved from a coworker standpoint. Who knows? Whatever the scenario may be. I think that there's probably some maturity that can happen to help you grow, that at some point you should probably not necessarily forget about it, but I think that you could probably reassess the situation. I think that second chances can exist for some people. But at the same time, if you're a mid-30s person and, you negatively impact a good group of people or something like that, and that's probably speaking to your character and who you are. So as you get older, it tends to be attached to you for a longer period of time, and it can get difficult to overcome it. So I think it is on a situation by situation basis that people need to kind of, analyze under a microscope, rather.
Yeah, I agree. That makes sense. We could just jump into the next one here. So Trey, what is the dream approach for experienced individuals when contacted by interested applicants / media without assuming the person is clout chasing?
I think Reese and Andrew had a better answer for this one.
Fine, we'll come back to you. Reese, go.
Put me on the spot. Something if you're listening, elaborate on that a little bit, because as someone that is from what I couldn't really understand the question, if I'm honest with you. Andrew, you've got a better.
Yeah. So our after reading through that, kind of our interpretation is, what's the dream approach for like an employer or something if they're being approached by an experienced individual that is wanting to apply for a job, I guess, something of that nature. I think that kind of we touched on it, and if I'm misunderstanding it, feel free to speak up. But we were kind of talking about the questions ahead of time, and that was our understanding of reading through it. Versus somebody who they're just strictly trying to clout chase, be a part of a big name brand or company. But as far as the dream approach, I typically ask very targeted questions whenever I'm interviewing somebody to really kind of get to know them, to unveil, why is it that you want to be involved in esports? Is it part of that clout chasing aspect, or are your intents genuine? Are you passionate about this? Because I'll tell you right now, a lot of people who have helped build this industry, who have been in the industry as long as I have, it's not a matter of, we really just want to work in esports. I can't work in another industry. I love doing this way too much that I literally can't, or I won't really feel fulfilled with my life. And so I am looking for like a very similar level of passion. Don't get me wrong. If I'm the business owner, I don't expect anybody to care about it as much as I do, but I am looking for somebody who's passionate, who has that drive, who it's not just another 9 to 5. They really care about putting in the time and the effort because it's what genuinely excites them. And so if you let your true character show through of, hey, this is what I want to do because I'm excited about it. These are the steps that I've taken to get involved with the industry. This is where I've tried to volunteer for the work. That's the dream approach for me, is that I can see that somebody, they actually have on paper, they have experience doing it, and they have a lot of passion about wanting to be involved and to going above and beyond to be able to do that and to be a part of the industry.
Yeah, definitely. And another thing, just on top of that, a lot of people need to, at a higher level in the industry, almost all relationships between an individual and an organization will be transactional. So transactional, there will be a reason for the individual to want to be part of that organization that's going to benefit them, in the same way that there must be some reciprocation from the organization with the individual. So there needs to be something coming from the individual, and you need to understand what it is that they bring to the table. And again, just reiterating what Andrew said, what it is that they're looking to gain from the organization themselves.
Yeah, I think I like your addition, and I definitely like your answer, Andrew. So I like it. Trey, now it's your turn for real. Even though esports are relatively new, can not having a relevant degree still be a limiting factor to those interested in working in the esports industry? If so, can individuals make up for that by having past experience with esports?
Before Andrew jumps on there, it's not new. Let's get that out. But not having a relevant degree, I think it can be a limiting factor just where things are now, but your experience is going to be way more valuable. That's just simply how it is. You can have a bachelor's degree, and colleges now are offering esports degrees, which I think is just a glorified business degree, if I'm being honest. But having like 5 years experience, 10 years experience is going to be much more valuable than any kind of degree you can bring, because esports is so unique, and it's not really something. It's more you just have to experience it.
Yeah, makes sense to me. I agree. And yes, esports isn't new, but it's still relatively new in the grand scheme of things.
Are you trying to get me to argue with you or what?
No. No. I was just trying to make it funny, I guess. All right. If nobody has any major follow-up to that, we can just jump right into the next one. No? Okay. Sure. So what is your current opinion on the collegiate scene? I think that's probably a good question for either Andrew or Trey.
I'll let Andrew start off with that.
All right. I think that it's a college by college basis, and I think that it's a title by title basis. To be honest, there's a lot of inconsistency both in terms of what titles are being played at what universities. There's a lot of inconsistencies with scholarships. There's a lot of inconsistencies with quality of facility and equipment, with coaches, of everything that you can imagine. And so I think that it's all great problems to have because the collegiate scene is intriguing a lot of people and they want to develop it. It's just a matter of time at this point. It's kind of already taking root across the state. And I mean, there are a ton of scholarships being offered, but like go look at that relative to traditional sports, right? And even then you're like, okay, well, yeah, that's definitely in its infancy. So I think that it is definitely in the process of being developed. But I think that at its current state, it is extremely underdeveloped. You can have a program that, you see all these things on, LinkedIn and social media where it's these really top tier programs like Maryville or any of the other ones that you see that they have this great facility. They have all the top equipment. It's basically like a pro team, but at a university, right? Then you can go somewhere else and they're like, okay, well, we have this program, but where are we going to practice? What does practice look like for us? And so it's completely two different ends of the spectrum. But again, I think that it's definitely on its way. And in the coming years, both in the high school and in the collegiate scene, you'll start to see a lot of further momentum. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of excitement around collegiate esports. The one thing I would like to add to that is I feel like like you said, the colleges or the college scene as a whole is very interested in getting in the space, but I feel like they're trying to fit, or I guess in some cases, because I've never dealt directly, on the student side of it or at a professional level past the apparel that we produce. But from the outside looking at it, it seems like there's a lot of collegiate programs that are looking to just fit esports into the mold that they already have set up for their other athletics. And it doesn't seem to be working as, parallel as it would to, standard athletics that they've been doing the same way for however many years. So I think it's super important for them for the collegiate programs to like understand that there's going to be some change and there has to be a little bit of wiggle room on both sides. Once we get there, I think collegiate esports will start to take off a little bit more.
Yep.
Trey, did you have any additional input on that as someone who was slightly affiliated or at one point was affiliated with collegiate programs?
Yeah. So for collegiate scene, it's definitely going to just keep growing. Yeah. That's just how it is. But in the collegiate scene, you have this massive clash of business versus community, where business is like 90% of it. And so if you're looking to go into the collegiate scene, you're going to have to realize that it's going to be a lot of people who don't understand esports, who probably have just heard of esports, trying to make esports work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so it's a very different environment, from my experience at least. And it's kind of a mess right now. Let's put it that way.
I hear that. I guess so. So I guess we kind of covered it, but what do you think is needed to improve the collegiate space? And what are you currently happy with? I guess you could probably take that one, Trey.
What needs to be improved is communication.
Yeah.
I mean,
go on.
That's just it. That's just communication. If you had that, everything would succeed.
Just gonna follow up, just because the UK scene is so much different than the US scene itself. Trey probably knows this. I've spoken to him about it before. For anyone that's listening on the UK side, so at the moment there is a huge open space in the market for anyone looking to sponsor or invest in the collegiate scene in the UK, and that's just because of the size of the UK. A lot of the universities there have focused on more people would call academic programs, and there are esports societies, there are esports programs there, but not so much the scholarships that people have. There are no facilities available for people looking to practice and grind. But you do have a lot of bubbling pros, especially in the Rocket League scene, that do attend university, that are being signed and are making the rounds of essentially the second tier of RLCS. But yeah, the UK scene is a million miles away from what the collegiate scene is at the moment.
Yeah, sounds about right. Makes sense.
As for the second part of this, of what are you currently happy with, that it exists.
Yeah.
yeah, genuinely, just that it's there. The foundation. That's about it. Bare bones.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta have something to build on, so at least it's there. So I guess, what sort of tournaments do you find the most stable and appealing? I'm assuming this is unrelated to collegiate esports. So this is Reese. I guess we'll give this one to you because you were next down the list. So what sort of tournaments do you find most stable?
So in terms of consistency and continuity, league splits are normally the best formats to go for tournaments, especially in the collegiate scene, and that's just because as a student they don't commit a certain time to everything. You know, each student is different. It is very subjective, but when it comes to leagues, you are able to schedule matches with one being on a Monday, one being having a deadline for those matches to be played and results to be entered. That gives you a lot more leeway. Whereas with single bracket tournaments and everything like that, you do have the issue, and this is persistent not only in professional qualifiers and minor tournaments, but a lot of teams just don't show up, or a lot of teams have trouble checking in, and you just don't have those sort of problems when it comes to splits or league formats.
Makes sense. Fair enough. Well, I guess so. Julian, you can take the next one. Can you list characteristics of what you think is a good event for players, faculty to be engaged with?
Sure. I mean, I think a good event is one that curates to the players' process in the best way possible. Managing a lot of teams in my time, I've been a part of quite a few events where it is extremely unstable, the environment is chaotic, and I don't think that's healthy for players, especially going into high intensity situations where nerves and pressure are already at its height. I've worked with a couple of events. Some of the high res guys have done it really well, where they used to do it at the Cobb Energy Center and they treated the players super well. There was barely any issues. It's a very clean cut process. And for faculty too, it's just so much easier, because the minute that chaos appears, players don't, they already have so much on their mind. They don't go and start trying to figure it out themselves. They call for us at the organizational level to figure it out. And, not to put anybody on blast, I won't say specific names, but there's been quite a few events where, the setups aren't working and the time that they said they were going to play is wrong. And all those things, I feel, deteriorate from the process of the player. And for me, that's a negative, an extreme negative, and it still needs to be fixed, especially, not that it's DreamHack's fault, but a lot of DreamHack events have so many issues with getting startups done, player exclusivity. So, that's where I stand on that. So,
yeah, I agree. Timeliness is definitely something I like, an underlying concern of mine. Again, never having managed a team at an event or played at an event or anything like that, but as a spectator of events, I've seen numerous times where there's timeliness concerns or things like that. So I definitely could attest to that. So Nick or Ashes had a few direct questions for each of us on here. So we could just run through those. Andrew, you're up first. What do you find is an effective way in dealing with lazy players who have an astounding amount of talent? Do you find a reward/punishment system more effective, or do you try to find ways to inspire them? I think this is a really, really, really good question.
So I first of all, you're gonna understand firsthand a lot of what I'm talking about, Nick, because you coached for a very long amount of time. You coached a lot of different players. But I think that whenever it comes to dealing with I guess let me back up and say I think one of the exciting things about esports is that you get to deal with so many different types of personalities whenever you're dealing with the players and the teams directly, and you get to work with them to get to know them, to understand their personalities. Whenever it comes to the just naturally, raw talented players who, like you said, can be lazy, I think it's trying to, and this goes hand in hand with a lot of performance things, of trying to understand the why of things. Okay, why is this person being lazy? He just, he does great in game, but he doesn't want to exert the extra amount of effort. Maybe he doesn't want to cooperate with the team or the practice regimen. Maybe he feels, entitled to show up late for practice, and it kind of pisses off the rest of the players, whatever it may be. But it's trying to understand and unlock that. Okay, well, why is he behaving this way? What's the issue that's happening? So, I mean, I've worked with players who, one was bipolar. His highs were super high, his lows were really low, and so whenever he was being lazy, it was a legitimate issue, right? So it's not something that he could really control. He just had not been diagnosed at that time. The other one is that he grew up in a very wealthy family, and he had a lot of sense of entitlement. So he wanted to be the best, and he wanted to play the best, but at the same time, he wanted to kind of go about things his own way, and it makes things a little bit more difficult like that. And then, there are players who they're foreign, and they kind of feel out of their culture or out of their environment, and so you have to make them feel like, hey, this new group of players, this team that you've been integrated into, like, it's all a unit. We all care about each other, right? So don't kind of distance yourself, like in that situation. As far as the reward or punishment system, or inspiring them, I think that everybody has something that makes them tick specifically. And so if I have to punish somebody or discipline somebody, and that's appropriate for one player, maybe that's not going to work as well with the other one. Maybe the one who feels really entitled, if I punish him, he's just going to retaliate more because he feels like I'm wrong and that he's entitled to not be punished. Maybe I need to just inspire and motivate him because his main focus was trying to be the best in the first place, versus, another person who wants to feel part of the culture or whatever. Maybe he just needs to be rewarded. So I don't think that's a one size fits all thing. I think that you really have to assess the players individually and try and figure out the psychology of, what's really going to make them tick, to help them with where they need to be, and get them to the highest level of performance possible and the highest level of happiness possible.
I agree. I like that answer. Trey, are there any software recommendations you have for other analysts in the esports space to help optimize analytics across different games? For example, manually entering stuff in an Excel sheet feels inefficient.
No. That's just because it's so new, especially with using data. All of my stuff that I'm using, I have made myself. And that sucks. And also, I also put stuff in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to deny that. It sucks, but it's necessary. Hopefully within like the next 5 years, maybe even 2 years, there will be things. And you can go to other websites and they'll have some stuff, but you'll get limited stuff, what I call flashy data, which is irrelevant and means nothing. So the best way to go about that is just to make your own stuff. Simple as that.
Cool. Reese, what suggestions do you have for others who look to get involved in a consultant role in esports?
So, to put it simply, I would definitely recommend don't rush into things. Take your time to really do your research and understand the ins and outs and the foundations of what you're looking to focus on, because as a consultant, you can focus on so many different things. So Trey focuses more on the data side of things, and I would focus more on the operations and the brand strategy side of things. But depending on what you want to focus on, you should really, whatever you do, don't rush into it, because you're going to be a lot more credible if you've taken the time to understand something and someone comes to you and asks something, in comparison to someone coming to you wanting advice, bring you on as a consultant, and you have the basic understanding but no in-depth understanding of what it is you're looking to advise them on, and you lose all credibility, and then you lose a potential client or contact in the future.
I agree. Julian, what do you look for in content creators who are on the rise that gives you a sign they will continue to see success and growth?
Yeah, this one's really straightforward for me. Consistency. A lot of content creators in the space, I feel, don't really understand being consistent that well. They're very sporadic with how they upload, with how they stream. And so, to take into an example form, recently recruited somebody called Melts. This was somebody that was aspiring to join Luminosity for some time, and he was uploading every single day, which is already for me a really good sign. However, he was not, big enough to become part of the organization just yet. And out of and out of nowhere, applying the algorithm that YouTube presents itself in, using tags, using the right titles, using the right thumbnails, he gets a 4 mil view video, and now he gains 150,000 subscribers in 2 weeks. And people that are consistently putting themselves out there and making content on a scheduled form and putting in the hard work present the most opportunity for success on YouTube and on Twitch, compared to somebody who's doing it 3 times a week. If you're presenting yourself on a daily basis, applying all of the tools that YouTube gives you, you just need one video. And he's a perfect example of that. And so when I think about continued success, consistency and appreciation, because there's plenty of creators that get that one video and they gain the hundreds of thousands of subscribers, but they are not able to stay consistent with their growth because their growth is so large, but their motivation to actually keep pushing it isn't. And so consistency is big for me. It's the number one sign for anything in terms of picking someone up. Because, when you're motivated, when you're passionate, when you wake up every day and you record that video, when you stream on Twitch, it's not even a chore. You do it every day because you love it. And that's, for me, is a big sign of being consistent. So
cool. I agree. I think that's very insightful. Consistency, I agree, also is super, 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 super important. So definitely a good point there. And then for me, what is a common mistake you see teams/organizations making in regards to clothing and merch in esports? Wanting to be somebody that somebody else is. The amount of times I have an intro call or I read an email that says we're just looking to do what 100 Thieves is doing, or insert brand name there. It is, it's like, you clearly are defining that you're not looking to do your own thing. You're just looking to replicate something that has worked. And I think that, it stunts your growth if you're looking to produce some type of apparel vision, or personal, not personal, like organization branding. If you're already out the gate looking to be like somebody else, you're going to have issues, being your own brand. So I think that is, at least here most recently, is the most common mistake I see. I guess that and patience. There's a lack of patience, and people want to do too much out the gate also. So be patient, be slow and methodical, and focus on your own brand voice as opposed to replicating somebody else's voice. Next question. With esports being so visual, how important is it for organizations to have a graphic designer/designers in-house? This is actually really frustrating because now I can't read the question. Because the preview of the live thing is there. Graphic designers in-house for an organization starting out or even a developed organization. I think this is also a pretty good question. I think this actually probably would be a good question for you, Julian, as somebody who's ran a pretty decently sized organization. What are your thoughts on that?
Especially now, it's almost, for me, I think you absolutely need it. As somebody that has like a huge network of, freelance designers and editors, it's very easy for me to say that, you could actually run an organization without having graphic designers in-house. However, not everybody has that established network. This is something I've accumulated through, over a decade of being in this industry. And so, especially now with how much organizations have to output, the focus on how an organization presents itself socially. You know, how do you speak yourself as a brand? You know, graphic designers are all crucial to this. Their creative process is essential to developing an organization to being just much more than just a team on YouTube or Twitch or an esports team. And I think, you know, personally, I think it's absolutely important. It's almost absolutely necessary. If you're able to accomplish it with freelance, then sure. But I think that's a very tall task. So
I agree. Andrew, Trey, or Reese, do you guys have any addition to that by any chance?
Yes, but I will wait and see if the other guys have anything to add.
I do not.
You're good.
Okay. So on the complete other end of the spectrum, as let's say a lot of these organizations, especially the amateur ones that are just starting out, you do have a lot of young people that are looking to have some sort of brand identity. And the important thing I would say is don't spend money on something that isn't. You have a lot of these organizations that will spend £300 or $300 on a package and do nothing with it because they don't have a direct plan of where they want to go. And to be honest with you, if you're a content creator or you're a stream team or something like that, you can create these graphics on your own. It really just is about how much you want to commit in terms of time to learn that skill, really. But there are ways around it, especially at the big. But as Julian said, as an established organization, quintessential to have someone that can provide that for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've always had a personal mindset. You know, if I could figure out how to do it on my own, what is it going to take for me to figure whatever like the situation is. I'm always going to try and, you know, look at what it takes for me to figure it out on my own. If I could do it, great. I'm going to save some money. If not, if it's going to take more time for me to learn and take away from another opportunity that I have, then that's when I'm going to consider paying somebody. But I think you describe a good situation here where somebody spends $300, $400, or $500 for a full-on branding kit and has nothing else going on already. There's no sense in them doing that, and then everything just sitting there in a dormant Twitter account or whatever the case is. You know, you're better off just piecing something together on some, you know, free or discounted version or something of Photoshop, Illustrator, just to put something together for the sake of having some type of brand image, and then going from there and upgrading and getting yourself really legit down the line. Okay. Trip just came in with a question. This is probably going to be the last question here, and then we'll go to closing remarks probably and wrap it up. And I think we'll probably put this one through everybody. What routes do you suggest smaller organizations to take to generate revenue while still in the startup phase? Andrew?
So smaller organizations as in like teams and stuff, or what? Because like the way I read that question, I kind of understand it as like, if it's just a smaller business, I mean, I need to understand your business model in general to understand like what direction you should take and try to, you know, be as good as you can at bootstrapping. I think that in general, trying to bootstrap things, trying to cut down on costs is, you know, always going to be better. At the end of the day, you know, if you're trying to get investors or if you're just trying to generate revenue, I think that bootstrapping is a good skill, knowing where you can cut costs and still have just as impactful of a product or a brand as possible. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, being able to sell the purpose and the mission of your company is in a very concise and meaningful way to get partnerships or sponsors or investors, whatever it may be. I think that it's a really big, important skill to have, is, you know, just the sales element overall.
Yeah. I guess just to clarify, I think this is probably more for like a team, coming from, you know, generating revenue for a team, more so for a team, less so than like a business. But I think you covered, you know, both or all angles there. Trey, do you have anything to add?
Skip.
Okay. Reese?
Sure. So as a smaller organization, if, as we mentioned in the previous, in the previous question, as a small organization, the overhead can be quite large. So to reiterate what Andrew said, it's important to bootstrap and cut costs where you can. If you can take the time to do something yourself and do it well, then by all means do it, and you've learned a skill. But to generate revenue, it's important to have a unique selling point, because you have so many organizations at that level now, and it's quite saturated, that they know what they want to achieve, but they don't really have a unique selling point of why they should be sponsored, or how they're going to get where they want to go. So it's important to have that unique selling and to be marketable as a brand for sponsors to come in. If you're not going to be utilizing sponsorship side of things from the start, which is usually the case, then you either go down the community side of things, which is where your brand is down, and that be it very small ones, because a lot of community organizations are non-profit, or you go down the content creation side of things or the competitive side of things. And in that scenario, you need someone that people are talking about, or people that want to interact with your organization because of. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Cool. Yep, I agree. And Julian?
Yeah, so I think it's important from a smaller organization to take what you can get. And I think this, I mean this on the sponsorship level as well. A lot of times you're thinking to yourself, we need to get that monthly sponsorship income, X, Y, and Z. However, I find that, this is something that's, might have changed a little bit since I first started with Obey and a couple of other organizations, that, sponsors are willing to give organizations the opportunity to present their worth without necessarily dedicating a dollar amount to them. There's a lot of great affiliate programs that are set up through some really great partnerships, through some really good endemic companies. And utilizing those can actually be good. I can speak to my personal success with Obey. If you have a design team to drive a campaign, to actually formulate your code and put it out there to your audience, it actually can be a significant revenue boost for you. Actually, our partnership with DX Racer was not monetary at all. We had a 5% code, which we got 5% commission, and it changed our business completely because we were consistent. We pushed it every week, and eventually the income from that code allowed us to get into esports, which brought us, through many different things. And so I think taking what you can get, it's very easy to look at all these big organizations, they're partnering with all of these huge companies and thinking, well, that's what we need to do. But I think you need to go step by step here, and start proving your value to the industry at any level you can. And generating revenue can even be looking through like subscription services, starting a Twitch channel, having people stream off of it. These are all things that at a small level can make a big impact, right? You get 1,000 subs on a Twitch team channel using all of the influencers that you have under your organization. You're looking at, depending on your contract, an extra $2,000 to $4,000 a month just off subscriptions alone. And for a small business, it's actually pretty good. And so that's the way I see it, utilizing everything in front of you. And it's very easy to look very big picture because that's all we see on social media, right? You see everybody accomplishing, you don't ever see anybody do, the process of achieving that. But take it as it is, take it one day at a time, and focus on optimizing what's in front of you. That's what I would say.
Now, as a quick follow-up to that, how do you best suggest people approach a sponsor to develop that type of relationship?
I mean, I think it's fairly straightforward. A lot of these companies have emails. If I could give any advice to somebody who is running an organization, please get on LinkedIn.
Yes.
It is absolutely necessary. Connecting there is so easy. Say you wanted to go to a Logitech, you're able to go to their page. You can find out who manages the partnerships and affiliations there. It's a platform that is absolutely necessary to developing yourself in this space. A lot of people may joke about it. It's like super corporate, whatever they want to say. But I quickly learned since coming on it how influential it can be. So definitely that.
Cool. I agree. Cool. So that concludes the question portion of this panel. I really want to come up with a new word instead of panel, because we're not really all sitting down together. It's just more digital, but we'll come up with something. But other than that, I think we maybe, if anybody has any closing remarks, we could just kind of run through it and then kind of all wrap up. So, Andrew, did you have any final statement?
Nope, I'm good.
Trey?
Nope.
Yeah, I felt the skip coming from you. Reese?
Just two things. Just make sure you understand what direction your brand wants to go in. And just another thing that Julian mentioned is consistency is so key. You know, a lot of people do get burnout, and burnout is such a difficult thing to overcome, especially after it happens. But being consistent and being able to motivate yourself is what's going to make you thrive.
I agree. And then Julian?
I think I'm going to say enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. It's to go back to what I just said in the last question, but it's very easy to get caught up in the end goal. Social media, we're always seeing it. We're always seeing everybody achieving. And it can put a lot of pressure on you individually, in society, but just focus on your journey. Learn to love every day, waking up and grinding for your goal. And when you can do that, in my opinion, you already are successful. And so that's something I would love to echo. It's something that you have to drive for every single day. I still drive for that. And so, especially in an industry that's highly competitive, it's our number one task to keep ourselves level-minded. Pay attention to your mental health too. It's really important. So,
yeah, I agree. I'm not even going to try and follow up that with anything more inspirational, because it was a good way to wrap that all up. But as far as this goes, I think this is a pretty cool first take at what this can look like on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I don't know what it's going to be yet. It's all a work in progress. I don't know if it'll look like this the next time we do it. But for those of you who came and hung out, I appreciate that. For you four guys that came here and talked through all this with me, thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I will be setting this up to some extent as a VOD version somewhere. Maybe not VOD, just kind of on demand in general, audio. And that'll all be in this Discord at some point or another, and then we'll kind of take it from there on what the next one could look like and how consistent these will be. But yeah, other than that, thank you for hanging out. And if you're watching the Super Bowl today, enjoy that. But I'll catch you guys all later. Thanks for hanging out.